You finished the first draft of your novel, but it's way longer than you expected. Now, if your novel's too big, publishers and agents won't want to touch it. So you have to make cuts, but everything feels vital to the story. I recently got a comment on a video asking about this exact problem. It says, I'm in revision for my first novel. It's a dark fantasy story sitting right now at 185,000 words, with 2 more books mapped out. I'm having a really hard time with cuts. Everyone I've watched says that a manuscript this long will definitely be dropped by publishers or agents will deny it. But my rebuttal is that each chapter really does seem important to me and drives the story forward. Even chapters that are more building characters to me still seem essential for book 2 and 3. What advice would you give someone in my situation? I don't mind killing characters, and I wouldn't mind cutting if it makes sense. Maybe I'm just too close to the story. It is true. If you're a debut author, general wisdom says don't even consider pitching something more than 100,000 words. And that's because, the longer a book is, the more expensive it is to produce. It makes the royalties lower. It's the difference between making $6 per book and making $3 per book. Now, if a company has to do twice as much work just to make the exact same amount of money, it's going to make getting a yes harder, and in a lot of cases, it's going to make it an automatic no. If you're in a situation like that, the first thing you want to do is check to make sure you're being efficient with your words. Sometimes we can tend to be a lot more wordy than we actually need to be. Can you cut words out or maybe say things in a more efficient way? A good example just off the top of my head would be all of the soldiers versus all the soldiers. Or I think that he's fast versus I think he's fast. In this scenario, the word of doesn't really do too much. It can be cut out. Everything still flows just fine. Everything makes sense. The same with that. You can cut it out. Makes it flow better. Makes it less complicated, right? If you're in a scenario where you can decomplicate your prose, always err on the side of decomplicating it. You're not going to regret making your book less convoluted in a prose sense. Now, this is important even if your book is short, right? You should never artificially lengthen your book by keeping in unnecessary words. Even if you wanted your book to be like 80,000 words and you're only at 75, you should still cut out these instances of words that aren't 100% necessary, just because it tightens everything up and makes it a better experience. Now, it's important, like I said, even if your book's short, even if it's a 40,000 word novella as well, but it gets extra important if your book is really long, because cutting out those extra little instances will actually probably buy you a couple hundred words or a couple thousand words by the time you're done. Especially if you're altering your sort of grammar structure in some sentences or the way that you describe things, doing it in a more efficient way. That, especially over the course of a full novel, can save you a couple thousand words. Beyond that, are you doing any unnecessary gabbing, just sort of droning on and on, saying things that don't even need to be said? Think about your overall pacing, right? Sometimes we're unintentionally getting into some exposition and not letting the work stand for itself. So factor that in. Not saying it's for this case or anything specifically. I haven't read the book or anything, but this is definitely something that we as writers have to keep in mind. Even the original commenter, because when they write book 2 or 3, maybe it becomes relevant in that book, even if it's not here. So like I said before, that can alone save you a couple thousand words just using these first couple tips. But what if you actually need more? and there's no way that you're going to be shortening it enough without making more substantial changes. Look at your scenes and chapters objectively. Are they all required? Are they all pushing the story forward or in the right direction? Would outright removing them hurt the story? Improve it? Is it neutral? Now, in this particular scenario, it feels like all of the scenes are necessary and they are serving a purpose, and it sounds like there's a good chance that taking any of them out would potentially be a detriment. So this is what you do if that's your case. First, you want to look at it from a more sort of wide, more macro perspective, right? With your plot lines, you're going to have a main plot and some subplots. Are you able to nest them into each other in a way that is more efficient and maybe takes up less space, less words, right? Are you able to make it so that some cause each other and solving some solve others? And are you able to just sort of streamline your whole story from a more broad viewpoint? Readers do tend to find stuff like that to be more tight, cohesive, and satisfying. Next, you're going to want to really zoom in and see if, on the level of chapters and scenes, can you revise some of them in a way where one scene will do the job that two used to? Maybe you can combine them, be more efficient with your word choice, and then you can delete that second scene. The same with chapters. Maybe you can combine those two chapters and that it could become longer, that happens. Maybe it doesn't though. Maybe it is that much more efficient. And then you can delete the other one because you don't need it anymore. Same thing with characters too. Is there maybe a character that's not very efficient, two of them, and you can combine them, make it into one character, and then you can just delete that second one out. All of these are the kind of thing that would be caught in the developmental edit, for example, but it's all about efficiency here. If you're looking for those big overarching adjustments in word count, maybe that's not possible though, but maybe it is the perfect way to consolidate, make things more concise, and turn some like 3 out of 10 aspects of your book into 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 aspects. Either way, this next piece of advice is a really big one for a lot of people. You want to begin a scene as late as possible and end it as early as possible. We don't need to see a character, for example, wake up in the morning, do their chores, and then go to a yoga class before they do the thing that actually sort of pushes the plot forward. And this example coming up, it's one I've used before, but it's a really, really good one, right? If there is a scene in a boardroom, for a meeting that's about to happen, we don't need to see the janitor in there an hour early just cleaning up the room and getting it ready, unless that janitor overhears something they're not supposed to or finds something that actually advances the plot. It's the same with ending a scene. If that meeting is done, or at least the important part is done, we don't need to see them slog through the unimportant part and then kind of just shuffle out of the room one at a time kind of thing. After all that's done, you can be pretty sure that your story is just about as efficient as you're going to get it, right? Just about as crisp as it can be, or at least as you can do without help. But what if it's still way too long? In this scenario, our commenter has a 185,000 word book. We're looking to get it, if possible, under 100,000. Is that something that can happen? Yeah, but the idea of cutting out 85,000 words in your novel is just not completely realistic. unless it requires a lot of work, right? If you're a hardcore overwriter, maybe, but the odds are it's not. The odds are you're really not getting 85,000 words off. That's longer than a lot of novels, right? They say that the average novel that's currently getting published is between 60 and 90,000 words. So you're looking to cut out the upper end of an average sized book. Maybe we can get it to 120 or like 135,000 words, but that might mean you got to make significant compromises and significant restructures that may or may not be realistic. Again, I haven't seen yours personally, and out of any other person that might come across this video, same for you, right? I haven't seen yours either. But, you know, if that is still, you're still like 20,000 words to 35,000 words over that 100,000 word limit, right? You're still in the same problem, right? It's more of a horizontal movement, a lateral movement. George R.R. Martin, he wrote Game of Thrones, which is part of A Song of Ice and Fire saga. He wrote a book. It ended up becoming so long, even for Game of Thrones, that he had to split it into two, right? Christopher Rocchio, you know, if you look at the way his name is spelled, that's not how it's supposed to be pronounced, but that's sort of the anglicized version of his name. He's the guy that wrote the Sun Eater series. He did the same thing, at least according to an interview I saw of him. He had a book he was writing, and he realized it was in the midpoint of the Sun Eater series, if I recall. He realized it was going to be way too big. He ended up having to split it into two. So it sounds like our commenter here has plans for a trilogy. Maybe it's a 6-book saga. That would be totally okay, right? That's totally possible. Maybe you just have to find a good natural spot where they sort of split. If it's important that this book remains as one book and doesn't get split, I would just personally query it anyways if I was you. You know, Stephen King, for example, he writes massive books. He still gets published. And he also was, at one point, a debut author. He was rejected, I believe the sort of common story goes, over 200 times, right? And there's so many other people that go through the same. It's not Stephen King specific. There's countless authors where they're querying hundreds of times. Sometimes they get lucky and it's only dozens of times that they get rejected, but it is very safe to expect one thing above all else: rejection, and near constant rejection when you're querying. Even if you follow all of the rules, you could get rejected for no reason at all, or for something that's straight up out of your control. A reason like this, I would argue, is pretty trivial, and anyone who's a good match, who deserves to represent your book, would most likely be willing to make an exception. Again, could take you dozens of queries before you find that person, but it probably was going to anyways, right? So if you get rejected, don't be like, oh, it's because I'm over the 100,000. It's just the name of the game. Just keep going out there. Plenty of authors get published with manuscripts that are over 150,000 words. So it happens, and it happens pretty frequently. It's just harder, right? I would get the book the best it can be if I were you, and query regardless. One last thing for you to consider is if you even want to be traditionally published at all. That answer could be a yes, could be a no, right? Back in the day, being traditionally published was kind of the only way to be seen as an actual respectable author and a professional in the industry. These days, not so much, right? There's tons of people that go indie and they find a ton of success and they're selling just as much, or even a lot of times way more than a trad author. The main thing is today publishing companies, they're not providing as much as they used to for the deal. And for the most part, it's just your editing and a cover, and they just kind of slap the book out there. They expect you to market anyways. And when it comes to book signings and book tours and whatnot, they expect you to put it together, if at all. And a lot of the time, they're not even going to budget that for you. In the trad publishing industry, it kind of tends to be sink or swim these days. Maybe it makes sense to self-publish, maybe it doesn't. You're going to have to weigh the pros and cons and decide which one's right for you. What I can tell you, though, is that the most common ways for people to self-publish is to do it through Amazon KDP and Ingram Spark. 70% of books are purchased through Amazon these days. So odds are you're getting 70% of the market, even if you don't do any expanded stuff. It doesn't have to be too complex. If you're looking to make it a business, though, and to really go all in with it, there are other places, like as I mentioned before, Ingram Spark, that can get you into everywhere else that you need to go pretty much. No matter what you decide, when your book is as good as you can get it, you're going to want to have a second set of eyes look it over. Maybe a developmental editor, maybe a beta reader, but they're the one that's going to be more decisively able to tell you what works, what doesn't, what's right or wrong, and help you bring your stuff to the next level. That's all I have for today, so if you guys have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comment section below. I feel like I've proven pretty well here that I actually will answer it, and I'll get back to you. I'll write your answer in the comments, just giving you a response. Or if it's in depth enough, I will make a video just like this one for you. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.